on some of the things, but honestly, reading the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis has been fun and yet depressing. Here's the thing. C.S. Lewis was an Anglican priest and a teacher of medieval and Renaissance literature. Okay. And a friend of J.R. Tolkien. Anyway, C.S. Lewis wrote a bunch of books, like lots of books. One of them that I read years ago, called Mere Christianity, is described as an apology, an explanation about, why Christianity is a good thing to be connected with. Okay. His arguments were clear. He provided really interesting analogies to explain, why Christianity was a good thing. I really enjoyed his book. And then I also read another book that he wrote called The Screwtape Letters. Yeah, you got that right. And Screwtape is a major demon in the devil's network, okay? And he writes letters to his nephew, who goes by the name of Wormwood. And he is a lesser demon, and he is learning how to keep people away from Christianity and to get them on a solid path to hell. Okay? So the letters are Screwtape's advice to his nephew, Wormwood, about how he has to manipulate, what information he has to provide, what direction he wants to encourage his clients. No, he calls them his patients to do to keep them away from the enemy. And the enemy in the Screwtape Letters is, of course, God. Okay. So there are 31 letters to Wormwood. And Yergz, it's the Republican playbook. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the Republican playbook. When you listen to what's his name's campaign speeches, he's using all the arguments that Screwtape is instructing Wormwood to utilize. So I guess, and this, by the way, the Screwtape Letters were written during the 40s, I think, which is telling. We've got Nazism right around the corner. Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if what's his name has read the Screwtape Letters and is, taking the advice of the major demons as far as helping them on their pathway to hell. So I wanted to ask you, how to get to, do you know anybody on their pathway to hell? And if you were going to take someone to hell, how would you advise them to get there? How would they have to behave? What would they have to think? Well, there are 31 Screwtape Letters.
I've told quite a few people, I've essentially given them directions on, at least advise them that that's where they could go.
No, you've just given them orders. Get thee.
Yeah.
Not to a nunnery.
What fascinates me is, just follow the footsteps of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Because what fascinates me about that whole thing now, I guess it was fascinating in 2016. I had some friends from Belize who obviously are not American and said about, wow, Donald Trump is your president? Mm-hmm. And they're saying it back in 2016. Mm-hmm. And I go, that's one of the amazing things about the United States, is that in all actuality, anyone can be president. Mm-hmm. So the downside is the best we could do was Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And but with what's happened and transpired from his administration, and you're never going to get a Trumper to say this, but overall how poorly it was run. And you know what? Just like with Marcella, I don't need her to apologize.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need a Trump supporter to tell me that that he's a poor president and a poor leader and a poor person.
Mm-hmm.
All of the major executives from within his administration have said it.
Mm-hmm.
There are something like 10 members of his administration who have not left the Trump train. And if you know anything about federal government, there's more members of the cabinet than that. Then you've got the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, the heads of various agencies within each cabinet position, other top advisors and brass, chief of staff, things like of that nature, national security advisor, um, uh, a bunch that have said, no, this guy's not just a poor president. He's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I may have told you the story about when I was his site agent for his last inaugural ball on the evening back in 2017. I ran into my staff counterpart somewhere at a bar in DC soon after some crazy ass thing from his administration happened. And I asked him, I said, what the hell? What's going on? And he looked at me with the straightest face possible. You think that's crazy? Wait till you see us in our second and third term.
Get out. Knew it then, huh?
You're only allowed two. That's blatantly point blank in the Constitution. These people were going for more than that from day one.
Well, let
And
me
it's
just.
just being said, he doesn't want to be president. He wants to be king.
Right. Then there's FDR. 4 terms.
But that was legal then.
Was it?
He's why that amendment is in the Constitution.
See, that piece of information I have never had. So that
Yep.
amendment came following FDR. I did not know that.
Correct.
I did not know
Yep.
that. I am so happy to know that because I've been concerned that hey, this is not the
Yep.
first time that some president has wanted to go beyond two. But I tell you what I wanted to talk about today. What I wanted to talk about today were some of the habits of mind
Mm.
and behaviors that Screwtape is suggesting that Wormwood try to encourage in his patient. And one of them that I found really interesting, and it's not the first one that's mentioned, but one of them is about gluttony. Now, usually, I think about gluttony in terms of food and drink. Okay, like you eat too much to excess, and it's embarrassing to eat too much to excess, and you end up looking like you eat too much or drink too much in excess. But in the Screwtape letters, gluttony is defined slightly differently, which I found really interesting. And I also know people whom I would never have called gluttons, but who fit Screwtape's description perfectly. And I thought that was one of the most interesting letters in this collection of 31 letters. Screwtape defines gluttony as someone or people who demand things their way. They may be someone who, goes to a party and, let's say, refuses to eat a certain something, or refuses anything really that is not done exactly, prepared exactly, or presented exactly the way that they think it should be done. There are people who might say, that's not how I would have done it,
I
and then
was just thinking
refuse. And then refuse. And, God love my listeners, but, Paul got a button from his daughter this Christmas.
I was just
And
thinking
the
that. Yeah.
button says, I wouldn't have done it that way, because that's who Paul is. I mean, if it's not exactly the way he wants it, he will often refuse it at all. I remember I'm telling stories on him, and I love him dearly, but I remember one time I prepared fried ham for dinner. I'm not sure if I told you this story before, but it's one of, and I just thought of it right now. I prepared fried ham for dinner because that's one of his favorite things. And I prepared macaroni and cheese for my kids, my little kids, because they love macaroni and cheese. And when I called them
Yeah.
to dinner, and keep in mind that for dinner time, my husband sits in his chair in front of the TV to have his dinner, not at any table or anything. We never had, dinner around the family
Yeah.
dinners like they do. Yeah. It was always a disappointment to me. But anyway, when I called them for dinner, I mean, the kids happily came in and, enjoyed their macaroni and cheese. But when Paul found that I was serving fried ham and not serving fried potatoes to go with it, he refused to eat at all. Fried ham goes with fried potatoes. It doesn't go with macaroni and cheese, and I'm not having anything. Interesting, huh?
Wow.
But that is an example that I just thought of right now. But uh, as an example of what Screwtape would call gluttony, you gotta have it
Yeah.
exactly that way. Now, the other stories I wanted to tell, and I'm hoping you have some stories too, because I don't want to be the only one, complaining about my
That's right.
friends and
Yeah.
relatives. But my I had an uncle and his wife who fit this description perfectly. And these were people that we had dinner with often, because we often, drove all night to Florida to visit with them, and we'd go to Cracker Barrel because this particular uncle that was his crew. That was his tribe. Um that and Sean Hannity and all those people. Anyway,
Yeah.
when
I
we
was
would
going to
go
ask.
when we would go to Cracker Barrel, it, after a while, became very, very embarrassing. And Paul always says that when he would walk in, when the waitress would walk us into a table, he would warn the waitress, this is going to be tough, because always, every single time, there was too much food or there wasn't enough. It was too hot or not hot enough. We didn't get the right silverware. Coffee was served, but the cream and sugar didn't come quickly enough. There were complaints about everything. And often, when we were ready to leave, I mean, you could, I'll never forget it. The waitress would come and be all perky and happy and eager to please and so forth. By the end of our meal, she would be beaten. Come to the table, prepared to be criticized, prepared for the anger and the nasty looks. I mean, it was so sad. And Paul would always, after we were leaving, go back to the table and leave an extra tip. And I mean, that's not the only place. One time we were visiting Sarasota, I think, and having lunch somewhere. Is Sarasota, is that in Florida? I always get it.
Yeah,
Sarasota? Yeah, okay.
it's
Anyway, we
about
were
2 hours
just
south of here.
right. We were visiting Sarasota and having lunch. And once again, it was a lovely place, and it was a lovely place. And I enjoyed the food. It was a lovely atmosphere and all that kind of thing. And, the bill toward the end for four of us, was close to $60. Okay. And I think, I think that my uncle left a tip of $5 or $6 at the table, which I happened to notice. Okay. And so we finally, and of course, there was the same, my coffee isn't hot enough, or you haven't delivered it fast enough, or the cream didn't come quick enough, or whatever. So there was all that. But at the end, to leave that meager a tip offended me so much. We walked out of there, started down the pavement again to visit shops along the avenue. And I said to Paul, I need to go back because I know what kind of tip he left. Give me some money because I never carry any. But,
Yeah.
he gave me another $10 or $15 and I went back and apologized to the waitress. And I mean, she was so grateful because she felt
Good.
terrible.
Hey,
How's that?
I was a bartender. I was a limo driver. I've done plenty of work that much of my pay was for was
Mm-hmm.
gratuity, and I know what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
not be appreciated
Mm-hmm.
when
Same.
you've actually done a lot of
Extra.
behind the scenes things,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that they don't know about,
Right.
but kind of sort
Right.
of should have been able to see.
Yeah. It's
Um,
and what to me is it's purposeful. It's purposeful hurting other people. It is purposeful, and that Screwtape defines as gluttony, which I found really, really interesting. I had never thought about gluttony in that kind of way. So you must
I
have
think
some
not just
examples.
your family or my family, but I think it's like a Pennsylvania Dutch thing to be incredibly critical, judgmental, or bitchy.
I think they believe that not showing appreciation will make you try even harder, and yet they're not self-aware enough to recognize that after a time people stop trying. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. Well, I think I told you this before. I mean, Berks County, and this is still true, I just heard it again recently. Berks County is, probably number one place in the entire country for hate groups. And the
I
sale,
told you that.
and I've known this for decades. And what's more interesting
Okay.
to
Yeah.
me is that it sells the most amount of preparation H, which I find extremely amusing.
You did tell me that part. Yeah. I thought that was,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now
Um,
that was a detail decades ago. I don't know that it's still
everybody
true
eating each
today.
other's ass.
I don't know that it's still true today, but from
I
my
knew that the
experience
hate
in
group,
this area, makes sense. Makes sense.
I remember the hate group part
Hmm.
was actually an FBI statistic that it wasn't, Mobile, Alabama or,
Hmm. Berks County,
whatever, Mississippi. It was Berks County. Yeah.
Lo- Long Swamp,
Yeah. And that's,
Ecclesville, all in that particular area. Yeah, we had at one point
I
a
would say
school
they're
board.
probably Woodchopper Town,
Yep, 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 yep.
Woodchopper
It's
Town
a
up in Earl
danger.
Township.
Yep, you got it. You got it. We had at one point during my teaching career, we had someone um, from the Aryan nations run for school board, and that
Wow.
was yeah, and that was, and I can remember we at that point, there was a whole lot of hype about the KKK being on the corner on Boyertown's square. And they would come once a month all dressed up. And it was during that time that this gentleman decided to run for school board. And I can remember in response to that, there were members of the community who wanted to start a unity committee, okay, to do things to kind of counteract all that sort of business within the school district.
Right.
But I remember being in the LGI in the new building of the high school, a meeting in which people were gathered in order to form this committee, look for a president, a vice president, secretary, treasurer. And I remember leaving the room because I was so afraid they would ask me to do something. Anyway, this guy was in there, and, at some point, he made the statement that he was from the Aryan nations. And I mean, talk about crickets. There was not a sound in the room. And he said, I'm from the Aryan nations and I don't hate anybody. And like I said, nobody responded to that. And of course, nobody asked him to be part of the Unity Committee. And he ended up not being elected, or maybe even get beyond the primaries. I can't remember anymore because it's been decades. But it was kind of a scary time in Boyertown. So we lived through that too, and it's so sad to see all that come back nationally now. So anyway,
Yeah, I can't help
gluttony.
but wonder if it's not coming back so much as it is coming out.
You're right. You're right. That's better said.
Uh,
It's
like they've
always
been
been
here all
there. It's
along.
been underground, and with
Yeah.
the crack that what's his name provided in airing it publicly, and doubling down on it. You know, the media is all over his commentary from this weekend. So,
Yeah. What did he do this time?
well, this weekend it was like, if I don't win the election, it's going to be a bloodbath.
Ah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. And of course, I mean, he's
He-
going after the refugees with terrible names, and you know, threatening to shoot them and all those kinds of things. So, all
yeah. I
sorts of
mean, I would
insults.
say as far as I get the whole because I've seen the movie Seven with Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt,
Hmm. Hmm.
Gwyneth Paltrow, and R. Lee Ermey. Um, and the one guy that was tied to the chair with the bowl of spaghetti and the bucket underneath his chair so he could shit right there at the table. Was very overweight, very obese. Um, I get that definition of, as you were saying, of drinking too much or eating too much. But the other one that I always knew before that I think is the one that plays into the Trump people is the phrase when you just keep doing something and somebody calls you a glutton for punishment.
Mm.
So, like you keep going back and you keep going back and you keep going back and getting beat up. How many times do you have to appeal something with the same argument and have it blatantly overturned before
Mhm.
you realize it's not the defense you should have?
Mhm.
How many times do you have to be critiqued by your family, by the media, by your neighbors for, following, naming somebody as your candidate for family values who's been married 3 times,
Mhm.
divorced twice,
Mhm.
cheated on all 3 of his current wives, or history of wives, got the third one pregnant while still married to the second one.
Mhm.
And this is your candidate for family values?
Mhm.
Oh, well,
Right.
that's not a big deal. Oh, okay. So we don't have family values then.
Okay, so what
And that's just one.
what this demon or this person headed to hell is offering instead that is more attractive to people than the family values they supposedly uh, revere. What he offers is hate. And
Oh yeah.
hate, and hate is, it's so satisfying for so many and so simple because there's so many people you can really hate. But the other thing, too, we finally are at the end of the Screwtape Letters, and the one that we talked about yesterday in this discussion group. And it happens to be letter number 24 if you want to review it. But is that the number one, the one that, I'll get it, the one that is most useful, the most beautiful of the vices, says Screwtape, is spiritual pride. Is being proud that you are at church on Sunday and are praying or looking like you're praying and feeling better than that your church, your people are better than any other
Yeah.
group. And do we see
I
that
mean,
a
that
little
was,
bit? Do we see that a little bit in
oh yeah.
our,
Yeah.
yeah, what are they?
Yeah. I've seen that throughout young adulthood in some members of the Jewish community for
Okay.
having been labeled the chosen ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another degree of that who's like, yeah, get over that. We're just as effed up as the Christians are.
Yeah.
But with
You cleaned up your
Trumpism,
language
oh yeah, I did that just a little bit.
just a touch.
Still dropped the letter. Um, but with one of the Facebook memes or whatever I've seen recently is a post. I think it's from The Office. There's apparently this recurring scene in The Office where they're in a conference room and there's a whiteboard or a sheet of white paper, a big sheet of white blank paper, and they're giving a lecture or a briefing or office meeting type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now people use that and superimpose other messages on the board. And
Mm-hmm.
the first one is the guy is pointing at the board. It says, uh, "Your religion doesn't limit me; it limits you." And then in the
Hmm.
next frame, the guy's turning and smiling at the camera, and the thing says, "Know the difference."
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I'm a person of faith, and I identify as a Christian, but I'm also not a hypocrite. And I think the glutton part that goes to the Trumpers is how they're doubling down
Mm-hmm.
from
Yes.
2016 to
Yes.
2020 and now 2020 to 2024. And quite frankly, with the pride, not just better, but like David Beckmeyer said, he must be my man crush because I must mention him every 2 weeks or so. Like David Beckmeyer said, when I thought most of the current remaining Trump followers were not that bright, he said, on the contrary, the ones that are left are the educated ones, and they're going to be the most challenging
Mm-hmm.
because they're so educated and fancy themselves as being so smart that they must be right about their choice to support Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of my two brothers, Ivy League schools. I think the biggest part, not that they're stupid people, that they're smart kids, guys. Um, But I think there's just this. You and I talked about this before. In fact, as I dropped the episodes this past weekend, I was listening to it where there is. Oh, damn it! I just brain farted. Oh, there's a degree that with conservatism and liberalism, conservatives call liberals just by calling somebody a liberal. It's it's a bad word,
Libtard.
and they don't even have to
Snowflake.
use. Yeah, they don't even have to use. Yep,
Right.
libtard and
Right.
meanwhile, it's all these conservatives that I'm seeing doing all the bitching.
Well, let me tell you, I'm real tired. I think I may have said this before, but I'm real tired of people who come to me and say, but I'm a conservative. Like, really? What does that mean exactly?
And that's
You're a conservative? What does that
what,
mean
and that's what we got
exactly?
into talking about. Yeah, yeah. So
I'm trying to
I
find
made
this.
one of my one of my more popular TikTok videos was a bunch of outtakes, not just outtakes as in like comical, but highlights, we'll call it, of
Mhm.
the podcast up the middle. And in one of them, I say you can be a Republican, you can be a conservative, and not be an asshole.
Huh. Good
And
one.
the analogy that I've been giving more recently is as of 2020, and now again in 2024, intelligent Trump supporters or just conservatives, like one of my co-hosts on the Friday show calls himself the homeless conservative
The what?
because he doesn't feel valued, the homeless conservative, because he no longer feels valued in the Republican Party.
Ah, I can get that. Yeah.
But he's not a fan of Biden. And I kind of sort of agree with his decision, although I don't. I do and I don't. He's not voting for Trump, but he's not voting for Biden either. If he votes at all, he's going to do the whole make a statement thing. And I'm like, that could be
Well,
beneficial. But what if that number of statements who could
yeah.
have maybe gone to Biden is
Yeah.
what would have kept Trump from winning back the White House?
Exactly. And I think that people, I'm sorry, I think if they don't understand that
I think there's
decision
still,
this
and this
time,
goes back to the,
I'm sorry, they're not too smart. I'm sorry, they're just not.
yeah,
They're just not. Can't you see? I
this,
mean, and I feel that way about people who voted for Trump in 2016. I mean, couldn't they see what they were doing? I sure as hell could. It's no surprise to me what has
yeah,
happened. None whatsoever. And I'm not that bright. Okay. And so people who couldn't see it to me are really stupid. I'm sorry. And
yeah, yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and the first time back in 2016, we got into it in a way that I never get into it with people because she was so adamant to vote for Trump because it helped her with her taxes. Okay. And she couldn't afford her brand
Meanwhile, that
new
never
kitchen.
happened.
She wouldn't have been able to afford her brand new kitchen because she would have had to pay so much money for her health insurance because of the Democrats. Okay, and so she was determined. I said, "But can't you see the Nazi in this guy?" And she said, "Oh, please, don't even go there. That's ridiculous. He's not anything like that." Well, guess what? Guess what? So I had a
Yeah.
conversation with her again on Saturday. Chose not to go there, but I could hear the same kind of thing. where, she's worried about her taxes. She's worried about the tax break she got back in 2016 not happening
But
in
she didn't get it.
2024. Pardon me?
Here's what happened with the Trump tax break to the middle class.
Ugh. No, tax break for the billionaires.
It's well, yeah, that's where it went. But
That's where
but
it
what
went.
tax break came, yeah, but what tax break that came to the middle class? What are you expecting sometime between April 15th and the end of May to come in
What
the
am I?
mail or come to your bank account?
I have no
Yeah,
idea.
your
I
tax
don't know.
your tax refund.
Well, or
Do you,
tax
do
bill.
you still get yeah? All right, okay. Well, but so many Americans get a tax refund. An
Okay.
H&R Block helps them get even more and more, and they'll do it again for you from a previous year, and you don't have to pay for it if they can't get you better. All that shit.
Mm-hmm.
People budget into their annual budget the estimate of what that tax refund is, and that's how they pay for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they pay for vacation. Whatever that big project is for the year, that's how they pay for it. So your friend in her kitchen was getting maybe $100 a month spread out over 2 or 4 pay periods that she probably didn't notice. And I'm just saying $100 to keep the math easy. But at the end of the year, that refund would have been $1,200,
Mm-hmm.
where she would notice it. So then the refund comes, and that federal refund is $1,200 less than what it was last year. Because you just lived the past year not realizing you were getting that money now instead of then, which any economist will tell you is the better thing anyway, because that's your money and the government's had it for that year interest free.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Yep.
problem with that is we're so conditioned to get more money back from the tax refund. Now that didn't happen.
Right. Right. I understand.
And people aren't smart enough to realize that by doing them a favor, he actually screwed them.
Happens all
Because
the time. Right.
you don't see that you have that extra $100 a month when that first number at the beginning of your paycheck doesn't really change. You went from 3,200 to 3,500 and you didn't really know it.
Right. Anyway,
um so
I'm
I would say, to answer your question, to answer your question from earlier, and throughout this whole episode, I would say the gluttons are especially Trump supporters that are still there for having been willing to just take in so much more bullshit. I would have had that war in Ukraine negotiated in 24 hours.
right.
No, you didn't. No, you wouldn't.
Really.
Because you're Putin's bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the whole world is saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says, "Oh, I can't wait to have Trump back so we can be more secure." The entire world is worried about that very thing.
Mm-hmm.
That the world is much more secure under Biden or anybody else.
Yep. Yep.
And
And
we're going the route that
and
David Meyer said we would.
okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, just that, and you said it yourself, and I agree, because I think it is kind of sort of an exception, but it's not. It's no longer a matter of differences in political opinion. And we've also gone beyond right and wrong. Now we're smart and they're stupid.
I'm sorry. That's where I
But
am.
when, yeah,
I
yeah,
am.
but
I'm.
when the entire Joint
I.
Chiefs of Staff refused to endorse their former boss, when X number of cabinet members and senior advisors and even people that were co-conspirators of what has
Mhm.
been, and that's why I got to get on this again because I'm putting together a playlist of documentaries by PBS, who, if you don't know what the public broadcasting system is, it's the National Public Radio of TV,
Mhm.
the nerdy ones.
Mhm.
But they do not, by design, present to you an opinion. It is all documented facts, period. That's it.
Mhm.
That's why it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
But they've done videos, they've done specials on January 6th, the January 6th committee, the Stop the Steal, Putin, all of which ties together. A lot of it is the same people in the Putin videos that are in the January 6th videos.
Mhm.
These are journalists that have covered both because of how relevant they are.
Mhm.
And if somebody actually from that camp really wants to educate themselves, genuinely, they'll sit and watch this playlist that I'm putting together.
That's great. That's
And
great.
if that doesn't change your mind, then yes, you are stupid.
Well, a dear friend of mine has offered a response to some of her people to say, hey, I voted for Trump in 2016, but how does she say it exactly? I voted for Trump, but I've learned and you can too. I can change
Yeah.
and you can too. And it's, kind of
I
a,
it,
kind of
there's a
a,
not-for-profit that I support here
yeah,
in the Tampa
I've
area.
changed and you can too.
The
Yep.
head of it, lost her fiance over that.
Really.
She was the one out on the street corner with a bullhorn, had the Trump flags flying from her pickup truck. And then one day, when he said that he had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, she just was like, "Wait, what? Just say it. We know you cheat, so just say that you did." That's what got Bill Clinton such popularity
Mhm.
when he admitted to cheating on Hillary with Monica Lewinsky and saying he did it because he could. He's got a higher approval rating than any sitting president, probably with the exception of Obama.
Mhm.
But
So,
she left
what?
because it's so obvious. And now she's apolitical because she's not a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter either. But I'm like, yeah. And this goes back to my sports analogy that I think I forgot to finish. Realize, Republicans, that if this was your baseball team and you've got a young team, you're not going to win the championship this year. Develop the team,
Mhm.
develop younger Republicans, kind of Nikki Haley,
Mhm.
um, bring back people like Chris Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy, um,
Oh
Ron
no, no,
DeSantis. Ron
no,
DeSantis is not
no,
popular down in Florida.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no,
No,
no,
they're
no,
fascists
no.
just as much,
Yep,
both of
yep,
them.
yep, 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 yep. Nope, nope,
And
nope,
Ron
nope.
DeSantis is not popular down here in Florida anymore. He
Nope.
had a law written in that he proposed and then signed right before he announced his run for president that if you leave office to run for higher office and fail, you can come back immediately back into your office.
Wow.
That's unheard of. And why would he have that done?
Hmm.
Because he knew he wasn't going to win.
Right. Or fear that he would
He
not win.
needed to keep this so he could come back.
Well, I tell you what.
Yeah.
Um, I'm eager to talk about more of these ways, paths to hell. Okay. But I think we've done it for this episode in
Sure.
discussing gluttony. And maybe,
This will be
maybe we'll
number
talk more
24.
next time about spiritual pride. But there are, like I say, there were 31 letters, and a lot of them can be wrapped up more quickly than we have done with gluttony. But I think it's interesting to take a look at and to ask yourself, if are you on the path? Is this one of the ways that's going to get you where you want to go? So, what do you think?
Yeah.
Sound good? Okay. Anyway,
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Let's sign off. I'm Jane Stahl.
And I'm Yergz.
And we are here with both sides now.
See you in the next one. I think that was probably better, the way we just did it there.